Good day, fellow adventurers. Are you ready for spring? I am. Then again, you are always a breath of fresh air. It's been a while. I'm glad to have you back. Come in. We're going down to the pond today for a little storytelling and skinny dipping. No need to be shy. We're all Stone Clan here. Welcome to Dresden's Tale, episode 65. This is season 3, volume 3, chapter 61 of our bawdy tale. This is high military fantasy, the kind that needs heroes. Ours is Dresden Fane, just stubborn enough to be quirky and likable, but never learn from his mistakes. He's a warrior of the Stone Clan, currently traveling by wagon to Brave Rock. I'm Lewis Nichols, your master of stage, screen, and YouTube videos, etc., etc. I'm the guy who wrote this crazy thing, a project spanning 2 decades and a whole cartload of Word documents. Thanks to YouTube, I now have a reasonable way to pass it on to you. Alright, spoiler alert, today's the day. On Ebba's 5th, 25 chapters ago, nearly half the entirety of Dresden's Tale to this point, Pink Eye called on the Stone Clan warriors in Georgetown to go forth and defend Brave Rock from the Iterian invasion. Well, my friends, at this very moment, there is a tiny little dot moving along a checkered line between 2 other little dots. It's moving away from Port Roth, an even tinier point that marks Opal. Just ahead, Brave Rock. Not only is this chapter 61, episode whatever I said, these are the opening scenes of part 2 in the minor epic that glorious season 3 has become. You'll be able to tell your grandchildren, you were here. Hey, you're only supposed to be in the outro. Where was I? No time for that. The wagon is just ahead. Here on the road, it's Jute's 21st day, 2052 years after the fall.
Tribulations, 311. 4 years before the end. 4 years before the light of the north. A friend of spiders, the king of shadows, first master of the great focus. One shall rise even as he falls, forever outcast, never defeated.
The journey to Brave Rock was long and circuitous, the road full of delays. Distractions of the simple sort were the most common encounter. Dresden didn't bother counting the broken wagon wheels or lame stock. Cormac did. It was 6 and 8, respectively. Other wanderers came and went, most traveling towards Brave Rock or others escaping it. A few were just lost. Some sought assignments on the coast. The constant search for water was the one thing they all had in common. That and a hatred of the Iterians. Only when they encountered the Shriek Oasis did it feel like the journey might one day come to an end. On the 18th, it was a mirage on the horizon, but the next day, the shimmering line resolved into a long green strip. They drank so much water they couldn't hold it in. Every one of them expelled quarts of the hot mineral-rich liquid back onto the ground. Afterwards, they sipped. Soon, they found a hovel on the side of the road, serving filtered water out of a great bronze pot with a handful of chill stones submerged somewhere inside. They paid a full silver for every mug and didn't complain once about spending coin or the amount of it. Civilized life became more common as the hours passed. There were big communal farms and a village full of goats branded with the Stone Clan Seagull. Everyone looked nervous, half expecting the Iterians to sweep through without warning. Warriors were in high demand as guards. More than once, the little band was promised coins, food, goods, and sex, if they would just stay for a day or two. There were militia squads who took up those offers. Little bands of warriors, some organized, some not so much. Once they passed a group of cloaked men, all sharing the same marks on the fabric. They were the followers of the Great Eye, the one who knows. Liz had to drag Dresden away when he found out the Great Eye was Praetor. She swore if he got them into a fight with the followers, she might just take their side. Through it all, Heliot and Kidu blasted down without mercy. Despite the cowl, Dresden hated it here. It was worse now that they were farther north. As if the two weren't enough, something yellow and shimmering loomed on the northern horizon, a sun-bright cloud that never diminished. There it is! Kara stopped to appreciate the moment. The rock itself jutted right up into the sky, 200 feet, water blasting out of its side like a well pump. Dresden nodded. Yeah, the towers and walls, they're worthy of a stone clan city. As they closed the last 2 miles, it became clear that it was a city under construction. Building went on at a frantic pace. I've never seen walls like these, Liz snorted. No one has. There was a cynicism in her voice. It's very strange, Cormac twisted his head, scanning to take it all in. The city is walled by keeps, but each one built independently. And it all looks like they're trying to fill in the gaps now, Kara pointed out. When they finally came through the gates of the city, it got even stranger. The colony was nearly empty, not just of people, but of the very things that make a city a city. A great open space lay beyond the wall, spanning right across to the high stone towers defending the other side. A collection of tents stood where there should have been buildings, some alone, others in lines, nothing matching with the next. Many were grouped by squads or militias, others stately pavilions surrounded by lesser tents of henchmen. They were of all colors, some fine, some fresh, others faded. A few showed the crests or simple marks of houses, churches, and clans. A fair share were Itarian, captured and now giving comfort to their old enemy. It was not a camp you'd find on any other plane. Every tent was as open as it could be for dissipating the heat, but covered in extra layers sewn or draped over the top to block out more light. Between the tents, which for all their hundreds were not so densely packed, existed a second phenomenon. Seemingly, wherever someone got the urge to plop one down was an ever so slightly more permanent structure of cut stone, brick, and wood. On the way by one such drab structure, Dresden paused to study the sign in front, naming the non-existing streets of Jasminet's Avenue and the Way of Stone. If he imagined hard enough, he thought maybe a row of tents some 20 feet away were aligned with this fanciful Way of Stone, and Jasmine's Avenue was very close to lining up with the way he and his friends entered the city. Dresden found it hard to focus on one thing, whether it be the grand forts, the incongruous tent rows, or the towering spire of stone reaching into the sky at the center of it all. Liz pointed him and gave him a little push so he could lead them along the Phantom Avenue. It led closer to the great horizontal spout shooting from the rock. Life flourished wherever water pooled. Near the rock, raised beds of tomatoes, squash, and herbs grew in abundance. Olive trees stood just beyond the wettest zone, and plum trees in between. Eventually the path ran right up against the stone face, putting them underneath the waterfall. In that small sheltered spot, everything was green or a vibrant red. Vines hung down from the stone, lush grasses lined the path. When the stone couldn't sustain plant life, a fine rusty moss took hold. Just beyond the falls, down the short-lived river, a forest exploded into existence. It was a brief moment of incongruity in the Vool Desert, but at the rate it was being chopped, it wouldn't last a month. Beyond the grasp of dampness, the path bent around the rock and eventually revealed the city. Still not dense, they located 4 streets laid out near the oldest of the ring wall fortresses. There were homes, temples, shops, and all the buildings one would find in any Keld city. A tiny island of civilization surrounded by the great reef of forts, keeps, and aspiring castles. Ah, I see, Donald drawled out. They could all see it now, the real city of Brave Rock. The rock was not such a severe spire from this side. Instead, behind the rows of city streets was a shelf scattered with monuments and administrative buildings. Then the elevation climbed again until it reached a structure at the very peak of the rock. I knew you'd get here eventually, Karen grinned. I heard some of the men talking about a hot minotaur and a dwarf, and it just had to be you two. Just as the quintet started to explore the inner city, they'd been found. All roads lead to war, Donald drawled. It's good to see you too, Orn. This is Cormac. We have a place. Karen headed off the introductions. Stormbound Keep is maintained by Irving's militia. He's not there, but some of his forces are. They say they can keep the Itarians away. I think we're winning, Orn told them. Karen looked at him like he was defying some order. That's a dream. Praetor has foreseen the siege of Brave Rock. It's a defining moment for the clan. It hasn't happened yet. It can't be a defining moment if it hasn't happened. Besides, he's dead. Think I executed him for interfering in clan politics, Orn argued. He'll rise, Karen said flatly. It's true. His purpose has not yet been fulfilled. Tribulations 41. The eye shall fall. The eye shall rise. Open or closed, the eye shall see. Dresden felt Kira poke him, prompting him to speak. You're talking about that prophet? Obviously the prophet, Kira whispered out loud. It's guff, Dresden followed up, before he could even think about it. The Inquisition might call it a heresy. Orn's face exploded into a smile. That's what I think. Karen, on the other hand, turned red, even as she turned and left. Liz took off after her, and for some reason Cormac followed. Get us all set up here, with some place to sleep, he ordered on his way out. Orn looked at Dresden. Is he in charge now? Kira and Dresden answered simultaneously. No, he's not. Is. Oh, well, that makes sense. Dresden, meanwhile, was starting to figure out what had happened. He froze up. He'd been happy to see Karen, but spoke without thinking. If Praetor had a power, it was to fool people into believing him, and he'd apparently caught Karen in his net. Orn, what's their story? He spotted another group of cloaked followers. They're true believers. Just some of them are real nut jobs. Better leave them alone. That's what I do. The higher-ups tolerate them, but they put off everybody. With all that's happening, any strong arm is welcome, but I don't know about these guys. Well, somebody else can deal with them. What's this about a place to bunk? Oh, well, there's lots of space available in the keep. Some of the dwarves stay down below ground. Are you a dwarf? He asked Kira. Dresden remembered why he didn't like people. They never got along with each other. There was always a problem, and they all had different faults. It was manageable, one or two at a time, but put them all together, and it made his head spin. The reminder, at least, was enough to get his legs working again. There's a school here. Dresden finally broke the silence as Orn directed them down the steps into this keep cellar. Orn smiled wide again. They'll teach you about anything. It's a really good training center. Dresden, we sure are glad to have you back. Karen and me both. I know it because of how much she always talks about you. Dresden thought that would get him in trouble for sure. If Kira hated Liz, she'd hate Karen too. The couple made their way down into the darkness, pausing while their vision adjusted. They found a number of rooms and a dwarven veteran. The warrior told them he was the sub-level boss and laid out the situation. There wasn't much to it. Stay quiet, don't bother anybody, and no lights. He caught himself getting annoyed when the dwarf looked a little bit too long at Kira, and maybe she looked at him too. But he pushed it out of his head. They eventually settled on a room 2 levels down. The boss told them it was theirs, as long as their travel journals didn't turn out to be fakes. The room was sparse, carved out of the stone much the same fashion as their last room in Opal. There was no furniture, just a little stone extrusion, probably meant as a shelf, but big enough for them to make into a bed. Probably built for storage, and just not needed yet, Dresden grunted. It's a lot of space. We will have to get furniture this time. Kira spent a moment unpacking. most of her things ending up in one heap or another. We're not going to try to do much else today, are we? Dresden grunted a negative. He was trying to figure out if he had any good socks. We need a lot of things. I can make a few tables and a chest. But really this time. Huh, yeah, really. It feels cooler down here. Does it to you? You know, we have some money. She watched him. I'll buy a chest, but you can make a table. Why don't you go up there and get some water? Suddenly, living 20 feet underground didn't seem like such a good idea, but it was better than living in the middle of the bright, noisy fort. Dresden grabbed their water skins and made a mental note about gathering buckets and a bowl on his way up the steps. Dresden! Karen caught him coming out of a man door into the keep's weapons yard. I'm sorry. About what? About Prater. I'm not like the followers. Doesn't matter. He's dead. Or wasn't. Dresden didn't really care. I want to explain anyway. Again, Dresden partially froze. He remembered all too well what Liz said about her. He begged her in his mind's eye not to make things hard for him. It's just that Orn is so set against him. He makes me say things I don't really mean. I was really just talking about the chance of a siege. We should be ready for one. That's why we're here, right? Dresden managed to start moving towards the well again. Yeah, it is. Or to take the fight to the enemy. I need to get some training done, too. And there's a lot of work while we wait. She hesitated. I have missed you. I see you're carrying potions now. It's just a strength potion. I got it for fighting at Karsai Trajan. You were there? Of course you were. You have to tell me everything. Were there really dragons? I need to get back to Kira. We'll talk tomorrow. He knew he was being an ass, but he had no intention of inviting a blow-up with Kira. He thought Karen was pretty, and she was fun, but she was also... what? She was married, a human. Did either of those things matter? They would to Kira, and that's what mattered to him. He could introduce Kira to Nanoc. They could have children, probably, and his papa would approve. Again, probably. Hey, Liz caught him as he started down the steps to the basement. I'm 2 floors up with the gang. Don't get too lost down there in your cave, or I'll have to kill Cormac. One more order, and I swear... She trailed off as he left. Dresden got back down to the room and opened a skin to take a drink. Kira got close in a hurry, her body glowing, every curve and crevice with its own radiant appeal. The water's not for drinking. She poured the cool liquid over a rag, then wiped it across his face and kissed him with a giggle. From there, she took her time getting his armor off, washing little bits and following him up with kisses. She pecked at his arms and rubbed her cheek against his hairy chest. It seemed like an eternity, but eventually he was clean, at least clean enough for her. Did you and Karen used to be lovers? They had been still for a few minutes after the act. Dresden was just thinking how they were still finding new ways to experience their lovemaking, even after months of being together. No, he blurted. She shifted, getting up to straddle him where he lay, her body forcing him to respond, despite what they had just finished. It's okay, if you were. You remember what I said, right? He tried to think what she meant. No. You were in total control today, Commander. I'm not. I was. I've never been with anyone like you, Dresden. I love you. And I know that doesn't mean just you and me in one bed forever. I want all of you, forever. I won't hold you back. Whoa. What just happened? You remember back when we thought some of our characters might have been a little nutty? Keeping up with Kira's moods is like chasing cats. You're probably thinking I have a plan. You're probably thinking they must serve some higher narrative arc. Once again, you overestimate me. Or do you? At this point in the tale, and for a long time to come, the story is told from Dresden's point of view. It probably feels a little third-person omniscient, but except for a few obvious scenes, it's really pretty limited to his perspective, and sometimes our perspective gets a little wonky. As if Dresden with women isn't wonky enough. That doesn't mean I'm lying to you, or that later I'm going to claim the whole thing is an hallucination. Well, probably not. It does mean there might be the occasional exaggeration, or misconception. Then again, she might just be a little bit nuts. Imagine the pressure she's under. All of them, for that matter. But she's pretty much on her own, discovering the wider world with no support except some grumpy dude she hooked up with because of a dwarf fetish. Yeah, I agree. Let's not dwell on that too much. I have no intention of taking a deep dive into the motivations of secondary characters at this point. However, if there's something specific you want to know or complain about, do it. I dare you. Leave a comment. Let's talk. Or better yet, let's chant. What do we do? Hit the like, hit the like, hit the like. What do we do? Comment, comment, comment. What do we do? Subscribe, subscribe. Don't forget to visit my fiction on Amazon for Kindle. While you're at it, have yourself a great day because you are spectacular and you deserve it. See you next time. Cheers.